All right, welcome back to Off the Crypto Cuff. I'm your host, Jesse, and this is Jeff. Two friends having a conversation, just right off the cuff, anything about politics, crypto, current events, stuff like that, all while having a drink. And usually we drink a glass of bourbon or sometimes a little, what do you have? Your
I'm finishing off the ball.
Oh, the Balvenie, yeah.
Mhm.
And then basically while we have a drink, we have a discussion, and once the drink's over, our discussion ends. So
Mhm.
tonight I'm having a little Tobacco Barn Distillery. This is a distillery down in Maryland, Southern Maryland. So
Mhm.
pretty good stuff. I like it. It's good. Looks like you have the Balvenie over there. So
Yep.
all right, cheers.
Cheers.
So yeah, let's get it started. You want to start off with the kind of the rough week you had? I mean, I know this week's been crazy, by the way,
Yeah.
just in general.
It's
Yeah,
been crazy in general. The markets, was in turmoil. Um, there was actually no outside of my story. So it's just a little thing about the way markets work and the way people try to predict the markets. Is there was people that bought a lot of military stocks like Raytheon, Boeing, and some of these other like big military providers.
right.
And after the actual strike and the initial ceasefire, those stocks actually dropped instead of going up.
Oh
So,
wow,
so you know, so
that makes sense.
it
Yeah,
makes
I mean,
sense. Is to
yeah,
say it makes sense for those people to buy it because typically you'd expect a prolonged war, so stocks should actually rise.
yeah,
But the reality was the inverse.
yeah.
So, and that's the way things happen. Is to say, you try to make calculated risks against what you effectively, theoretically, should be able to afford to lose. So
So so
here's,
so basically, what the reason I was, we gotta give a little context here, I think, because basically what it is, I think last time we spoke, I think Israel, Iran had bombed Israel. Kind of the conflict kicked off.
Mhm.
Since then, we've had, we stepped in, the U.S. stepped in and
Mhm.
blasted a couple bunkers of where they in Iran that has atomic, atomic weapons or
And
uh,
it's there was the nuclear material refining.
nuclear. Sorry, yeah, nuclear weapons or material. Um, Tr- since then, Trump has basically worked a ceasefire, which is still, I think, going on. I know it was a little rocky there at first because Israel's tried to say, hey, you know what, we're not done. Just basically like they're trying to. I
It
felt like
led
they
to
were,
basically Trump dropping the F bomb.
yeah. Trump
He
was
was
pretty
pissed at both of
he
them.
was pissed off and dropped the f bomb, and to every right because he basically worked this whole deal and then turned around. Israel tried to play this little like game, and it's like, why would you do that? Like it's like you know, I it's crazy, and to me this is a war. I mean, this something's been going for thousands of years. I mean,
Yeah.
this war, so
And
I mean,
and he actually said
it's
it. So it's like
escalated.
they've been
Yeah.
in conflict for so long, they don't know what the F they're doing.
Hmm, hmm.
Paraphrasing. And I want to amend what I was saying before because I looked it up and it's the War Powers Act.
Yeah.
And I find the War Powers Act very questionable, especially constitutionally, but it's never been challenged in Supreme Court. It was in 1973. I just looked it up. Federal law designated to limit U.S. president's ability to initiate or escalate military actions abroad without Congress consent to Congress. It requires the president to notify Congress within 48 hours of military action and prohibits armed forces from remaining for more than 60 days. So that's what gives the president to do these unconstitutional actions. So technically, they've got this law that gives them that ability to do this. I find the law to be unconstitutional. I'd rather any war to be declared through Congress. After really thinking about this, and I'll get to my story because you brought this up. So we're kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
tangenting
We're
a
kind
little
of,
bit,
hey, off the cuff.
right?
Let's go.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
off the cuff. Um, No, the thing is, as I said, we have basically public discourse when it comes to these things, which lends to basically several problems. One, I want to know how my Congress members and senators vote when it comes to these things. So it needs to be publicly debated or publicly known how they voted for a certain thing. So how do we have Congress actually regain control of this power, limit further what the president can do? Because honestly, I don't think this is our conflict. I mean, Trump.
Oh no, 100%. I agree.
It's like, I think Trump got lucky. It's like, I've been public, on X. I'm not really necessarily happy with the decision. This was not our fight. Is like, if he wanted to sell those bunker busters or loan the B2s, to Israeli Israel and have their own pilots fly it in, maybe, like a strong maybe. But having our people do it, that's
yeah. I think what they did is very strategic.
Yeah.
In so many ways, I think he strategically picked the ones he picked that they bombed. I know there's more. This. It wasn't all of them. I think I have a feeling Israel was like, hey, they have atomic weapons. Like, we're not, nuclear weapons. Like, we can't do it. We can't fight against that, essentially. So, but also like, and I think the world, like, they shouldn't have this stuff. Apparently, from what I understand, I'm not super on top of this particular topic, but way I understand is they have stuff that they shouldn't have. And I think by him doing this, it disarmed them essentially to allow them to like, oh crap, because you saw how they retaliated. They went, they shot at our U.S. bases in Qatar, and what they're shooting, short range ballistic missiles, they didn't even make it there. Like, it's, it's like, so their technology in that arena is obviously weak, or they maybe, or maybe they were just trying to, it was just a retaliation. So they were like, just let's shoot some of our shitty missiles over at them just to say we retaliated. And, but we're really going to, see what, abide by what they want to do. But I don't know.
There's a lot of, with any type of administration, regardless of country, when somebody smacks you in the face or drops a gauntlet, you have to save face in some way. Where I'm trying to, kind of focus is basically my own thoughts on how to have a constitutional amendment that would fix some of these issues, but also in the modern era where almost everything is instantly public, and you don't want a potentially adversarial country to know that you're planning to go to war or thinking about going to war with them. It's just like, so how in the modern era, because like back in the day when the Constitution was written, we didn't have radio, we didn't have TV, we didn't have the internet. Now, information literally travels, basically at the speed of light.
Yeah, in seconds.
In a matter of seconds. So, so how do you have, is like, this country is doing X, Y, and Z, or they did an A, B, and C to us. Are we going to authorize war against this country? Is this like, you need to have that conversation kind of in private. And I would actually do it a couple of ways. One, to discourage it, but the other, to fix some other issues. I was thinking about it a little bit more, and I think this actually makes sense. Don't even forget the idea of term limits for Congress. What we actually need is, we already have for president, but we probably need to go on the other edge of it too. But for both, is a minimum age requirement to go into Congress, but also a maximum age requirement. And there's a reason for this. Is if there's a wartime discussion, and we need to go back to actual declarations of war. This is important to prevent in Iraq and Afghanistan and Pakistan, all these different countries where we had these indefinite wars. Because when you actually have a constitutional declaration of war, part of that is, what is the stated goal and the termination date, which we haven't had in such a long time. So in other words, what is our winning condition? Is like, you're authorized, basically it's Congress, the people saying you're authorized to go in to accomplish this.
Yeah, that's the problem with wars now. There's no
Right.
condition.
Right.
Seriously. That's why. I mean, and even I feel like even in the past, like World War II, Korean War, stuff like that, there was really no even with that. Honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I think what we did as a country, and I think there's like stuff out there about it, is like we declared winning that we won,
Mm-hmm.
and then we had a parade, and that's what they would do. Soldiers coming home, and that's how they declared it. It was never really there was never really a final like, yep, we won, stick our flag in the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the Civil War. Even I think was even that far back. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really won. It was just basically both sides come to terms on, and I don't even think that because isn't Korean War still going? It's not.
Yeah, it's just a
Yeah,
ceasefire.
yeah.
We're
It's
still
ceasefire.
technically at war with North Korea.
Exactly. So I mean, we're still at war here. Like Israel and Iran are still at war. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
ceasefire. That's what they've done. It's like, yeah.
So
Anyway,
basically, formulate the constitutional
derailed you a little
amendment.
bit there.
Yeah, I know. It's like I was letting you go because I know that I'm hitting a big subject here,
Oh yeah, it's a huge subject. Yeah,
and basically what I think it may come to the conclusion of, and this is the reason why the age requirements are important for Congress,
yeah.
is one, the conversation does happen in secret, but the second the votes are done, the votes are made basically public. No, I mean, in other words, you have to put your name to it. The reason why is everybody that votes for war immediately gets commissioned. They don't go to the Pentagon. They don't go to one office. They're leading troops. They're going on the front lines with everybody else.
Okay.
I mean, but it's the deterrent because there's too many people in Congress that want to put other people's lives on the line.
Right.
There has to be risks. There has to be skin.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole thing. Like people were giving Trump accolades about this situation is because he basically zero U.S. fatalities, took control of the situation, made the two sides come to an agreement. He led the whole thing. Apparently, from what I understand too, the guy hasn't slept in like 3 days, basically doing this. Because he's like
Mm-hmm.
he's got to go. I think he's in what's the world I'm trying
What,
to
the
think of right now.
G7 or
The G7
no,
or whatever.
no,
He was
NATO?
at the G7 summit, and then he went to the or something like that, and then he was heading to NATO headquarters or whatever that's
Mm-hmm.
at, and then coming back here and then having the brief Congress on it. It's like, and what's funny to me is like Congress is like what's his name, the speaker is like we want to know what's going on. I'm like, the dude hasn't stopped for like 3 days. Like, give him a break. He's trying to like make shit happen. It's like, I don't know. I think it's a lot of like just people like kind of like try to act like they care. Like as far
Mm-hmm.
they don't that they're just playing their part. I guess if that makes sense. Like,
Yeah.
no, I don't know.
You could tell
Sometimes I
how
just wonder. Go ahead.
you could tell how the mainstream news and all that stuff actually feels about war because all of a
Yeah.
sudden almost everybody is just like, hey, look, Trump's being presidential. It's like, wait a minute, now you have something positive to say about him after
Yeah.
8 years.
I know. Yeah, they were saying even some of the Democratic parties kind of leaning in his
Mm-hmm.
direction again, but whatever. I don't know. It's just, I mean, so totally gonna go away from this right now. This, sorry,
Off the
uh,
cuff.
off the cuff. The other thing I saw the other day or today, actually, I think I read it was, uh, did you know that I think I want to say it's Greenland. Did you hear about Greenland?
Oh,
Yeah. So they're talking about Trump's trying to buy Greenland.
right. Yeah, we talked about that.
Did we talk about that?
Oh, a while ago. Denmark is the current landowner, and
Yeah,
they keep
Denmark's
saying no. Yeah.
the current ruler. Greenland seems like they want to get away from Denmark.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because Denmark can't. They're a small country. They can't support the. They can't support Iceland
Mm-hmm.
or Greenland. Sorry, get them mixed up. Can't support Greenland necessarily. With there's only what I think like 8,000 people that live there or something like that. It's not a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they can't support the infrastructure, the anything about it. The other part is too is I guess China wants it, obviously. Some other countries, so they can't seem to. They're having a hard time keeping them off, basically keeping it away. So it kind of makes sense from what I understand for us. It'd be like the Louisiana Purchase, essentially,
Yeah.
is what I understand, kind of equivalent of that.
Well,
But there's a lot of resources there.
there's a lot of resources there.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of ice melt from the Arctic. And so that's going to open up some new shipping lanes. And that's why everybody's going to look at it, because one is going to make, particular types of boat travel, faster. Also,
U.S. military.
And then there's that too.
Yeah. It's a good position for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but all the resources, there's oil, there's apparently lithium, other, those are the two bigs, then there's a lot of other resources there apparently. But I guess it was Trump's son and some other kind of known influencers went to, and they went there for like a 24-hour, like, go check it out. And I guess the people were all there, like the people who like are at the airport, some of that meeting them and stuff, were all like wearing the MAGA hats and everything. And it sounds like they really want it. I mean, there was no political, ties that were there apparently, but it was, sounds interesting. I mean, could you imagine? That'd be crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyways, that was something else I wanted to bring up because I thought it was interesting. I think it was more interesting. I didn't realize. Did we talk? I don't remember talking about that, but I guess I just thought it was interesting because it was recent, because Trump's son went there, and then they were kind of doing like a little recon, apparently. So that was kind of neat. Yeah. But back to Iran. So there was something I wanted to mention earlier, because you were talking about the what year was that with the 19 something?
Oh, the 1973, the War Powers Resolution.
Yep.
War Powers Act.
So what I understand too is something with when after 9/11 happened, there was something given to like president authority to defend the U.S. For terrorist acts, essentially, without having to clear it with Congress. So I think this supposedly also fell into that, from what I understand, because they were making, like Die America, like kind of things towards us, essentially. Yeah. I know it's a little bit of like, from what I understand, it's a little bit of a, it's sort of reaching a little, I guess you could say, but there were threats against the U.S. from Iran, essentially. So that's why they kind of were saying that too, from what I understand. But yeah, the one you 100% brought up is, but yeah, very interesting. So, anyways,
with all that said, circling back to basically my pain.
Your week of pain.
Yeah, my week of pain. So
what happened exactly?
No secret. I'm heavily invested in Algorand. I've discussed that. Not only am I invested in Algorand, their tokens are called ASAs. I'm invested across several. Not just any single one, but one of my heaviest holdings, because what I'm going after is trying to get the best ROI that I can. So basically make the money work for me. Yep. And so there was a project on there. It was really, it's a neat idea, because it was basically a community owned, effectively, or a community funded online casino called Algo Casino. So they had a native token called chips. So if you held chips and provided liquidity for it, you would actually get, because it wasn't fully distributed yet, so you would actually get this daily airdrop, for how much you held. And then there was a staking platform for it. So if you took your liquidity or just by holding it, you could stake it. And basically, this was a weighted system according to how much you had and all this other stuff. You could stake it on their platform, and each week, if they were in profit, they would distribute those profits across the holders.
Mm-hmm.
If they were in a loss, they actually had an automatic escrow, and those losses would go to the escrow. So basically, it was basically a no risk to the holders.
So it was a win-win situation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, and their algorithms were basically provably fair, so all the games were technically fair. So a lot of different things actually happened within the last month that actually, or over the course of the last year, that culminated to Algo Casino having to close its doors and causing me a massive loss. Massive to me. I mean, there's actually some people on X that actually lost a little bit more, but it just, for me, it was pretty big.
So the casino shut down?
Yes.
Basically? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So basically, over the course of the last year, they've actually had less traffic. So basically, the economy, right? So if the economy's not doing good, people are not going to go play a lot of gambling games.
Right.
So basically, they had reduced traffic, and part of what actually came out, recently is that their operating costs. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're actually running on thin margins, it is a lot. So their operating costs to run the website was $600 a day.
Well, that's because of the way I feel like that could be because of the way they were setting up your investment.
No,
right?
it had nothing to do with the investments. That was running. That was hosting the actual web page, because it was kind of.
I'm saying the thin. You said that they were running very thin, like they're and what you were saying basically is when they were up, they would share that with your chips, right? But then when they were down, they kind of took that.
They would take the losses into out of the escrow.
And then so it was kind of like a win-win for you, but a lose for them.
No, because what I think is just like, if I remember correctly, the way the actual winnings would work is that half of the earnings would actually go to them as the house, and they would actually distribute part of that into the escrow. So they were managing that.
Right.
So they were supposed to be building that out, and then some of that would actually help cover some of their stuff. So but if you actually take a look at
increase, but also decrease, is what you're saying,
right? Well, because they weren't always winning, because the games were actually built to be fair. So sometimes you actually had really good, profitable weeks, and some weeks there was actually decent negatives.
Yeah.
But if you have reduced traffic, that means that your actual overall income also shrinks.
Yeah.
And this gets into a tokenomics conversation as well. Because that was actually part of the problem, because I was actually trying to do some post-mortem thoughts on this. And this actually kind of goes back to a different conversation that we had on here. So they had reduced traffic. Then there was basically a hack that stole I think it actually gave instant winnings or something like that. It basically caused a drain on them. And basically they couldn't give out rewards that week. They were basically upfront a bit about it. I think I talked about it briefly.
Yeah, I do remember that.
Because it kind of tugged my gut a little bit. It'd be like, I need to sell. But at the same time, as we both know, is like sometimes you can't operate completely on instinct in this environment. You really have to think of it through it and everything else that is going on. So I was like, okay, they're being upfront. They've been around for a long time. There's no other indications that they should be failing, at least at this point, right?
Right. I gotcha.
I should have sold,
or at least gotten somewhat out of it, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the thing too, right? It's kind of a learning process. Indication like that, like you maybe you should have said, hey, this looks a little rocky, but I don't want to be fully out of it, but maybe I'll pull out, at least pull out my investment or part of the investment. But yeah, I gotcha. I get it too, because we're all looking for that that golden child, but but yeah, I mean it's tough, but that's part of, I think that's part of the process of investing and learning how to and seeing those kind of the writing on the wall, essentially. But yeah. Sorry, continue on.
And so basically, went to bed, everything was fine. Woke up, and basically a third of my algo portfolio, because again, I think I've discussed this before. When I actually take a look at my crypto, and especially my Algorand, because I'm in DeFi, I don't pay attention to the dollar value. I pay attention to the algo value, because that fluctuates because of impermanent loss. Either I'm up over algo or I'm down. And I was down almost by a third when I woke up. And I'm like looking at it and be like, what in the hell happened? And then I started on, so I went on to X, started seeing my crypto X was blowing up. And apparently what happened is that their finances were so bad that they took their liquidity pool and put it into a what is it called? When people are betting the market, that'll actually go up or down.
Oh, they put it. Oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
You know the term, right?
yeah. Basically, putting in expecting a loss.
Right. Well,
betting against it is what they're doing.
Well, they were betting for it, and they got liquidated.
Mm-hmm.
And when they got liquidated, it just zapped the liquidity out of everybody. And there went basically a third of my algo right there. And then I guess I really wasn't paying that much attention. And so when I finally made the decision to sell, I literally watched because I was like, no, I'm trying to get it on my phone and everything else. And I thought I actually went through with it, and I didn't. And when I looked at my phone, I was down even more. I'm like, God damn it. I didn't actually go through with the actual transaction to get out, so, I mean, and I'm kind of telling the story because the thing is, I'm not, being dumb about my investments. I'm trying to be smart about my investments. And I'm not going to sit here and cry about the investments. It's like, oh my God, all crypto is a scam, because it's not. This is a failed business. And I invested in a business that, tried to do its best, but ultimately ended up in this market environment. And it is what it is. And I'm coming away with some personal lessons about how I'm going to gauge in things I invest in the future. So this is where the tokenomics point.
Okay. It's a learning process.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. But it's also that's what we talk about, like in the past, is like you only risk what you're able to lose. If that makes sense. Yep. Especially because this is a high risk environment. It's still not. We're talking. What are we, like 2% of the world? Who are in this space. With money. I mean, one day it could be more. We don't know. It's that's what crypto is. It's almost like penny stocks, but not. I feel like now at this point they're beyond penny stocks, but they're not quite. Real stocks. But it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's I think, like we always say, do your own research. But even then, sometimes that can sort of not necessarily be a winning situation. It's just
I have some thoughts about that, but that gets into a slightly different topic. So let's
tokenomics.
We're off the cuff, but come on. So basically, kind of like where I'm sitting is just like, it's been proven to me pretty much at this point is any tokenomics where you actually have an in-kind reward, there's potentially problems. So basically, and for the chips case, so the chips, you were basically rewarded across the board in chips. So that meant that once you accumulated the amount that you actually cared about, you would actually immediately sell your reward. And that basically put a continuous sell pressure on the token. So if you take a look at, Vestige, you'll see that the price has been on a steady decline over the years. It's, kind of does have, some waves, it goes up and down, but the overall trend was downward because there was always this downward pressure. So basically my goal was to try to, collect 1% of the supply, get it staked to try to make it as stable as possible. I'd have a good controlling amount of it. just leave it and then just pull it out and sell. No, not pull the stake out, but off the rewards, just sell the rewards. Because at that point, I would actually be kind of satisfied. And then hope that the actual the value of it would rise over time. In other words, make that bet. It wasn't a valid one, but make that bet. Now, there are examples of doing in kind that kind of sort of works. But that's, give me 1 second. Need to flip over to. So there's different styles of rewards.
So you were doing all this staking on what platform were you doing it on?
The state and the liquidity pool was in Tiny Man, but you would take the Tiny Man the liquidity pool and you would stake it on their site.
On their site, okay.
Gotcha. And then you would actually earn more chips on their site. So basically, like Tiny is an example of in kind. So on Tiny, you could take your Tiny and you can lock it up. And right now, I actually locked up a lot of Tiny in their governance system. And you basically specify a time frame over which you want to lock it. I maxed it out. I said to go ahead and lock this Tiny up for 4 years.
Oh, wow.
And it gives you basically voting power on their site on which liquidity pools will get more Tiny rewards. So one, you get rewarded for locking it up. You don't necessarily have to vote, but you get voting power. So now you actually have the ability to influence the operations of the site. And on the other side of that, you're getting more Tiny. Now, overall, there is sell pressure, but for people coming in, there's also buying pressure. Now, they also have a buy and burn mechanism in there. I kind of forget exactly how that works. Now, there are different other models. Of course, we talked about the Ethereum model, and the Ethereum model basically went into the Harmony 1 model, so slightly different with different interest rates. So Ethereum, when they went from proof of work to proof of stake, when of course you're getting rewarded Ethereum, but there was even though that it made it inflationary, it was deflationary because during the transaction there was a burn that happened, and as long as Ethereum was getting used and their burn rate was higher than the actual creation rate, it overall or in aggregate was deflationary. Well, as we found out, all these layer 2s have pulled most of the use out of Ethereum, and Ethereum is now inflationary.
Okay.
So there's a question of whether or not they can get back to it. So again, introducing issues. That's where in kind, becomes problematic. An example of not in kind is look at VeChain, one of your favorites.
Yeah.
Right. So for VeChain. Now, if you're holding VeChain, you're actually rewarded the gas fee. The gas fee is VETHO. So basically, that means that you're encouraged to hold the VeChain, and then you're rewarded the actual thing that's actually going to allow you to interact with the chain. Right. So the more that you actually hold of the actual native token, you're going to be rewarded in the gas fee and actually reduce your costs in the long term to be able to actually interact on the chain. So it's actually kind of interesting the way that actually works out. For an application side, take a look at what Alpha Arcade is doing. So Alpha Arcade is Algorand's version of Poly Market. So it's a betting market. So they have a token called Alpha. You hold Alpha, you're not rewarded Alpha. You're rewarded USDC.
Oh.
So
that's not a bad deal.
Right. So basically now you're actually encouraged to actually hold the token. So, and it's a very similar model to what Chips did, because it is a profit sharing model, because all of their interactions on that page for the Alpha Arcade is actually done in stablecoin.
Okay.
right? So it's a different way of looking at these these models and things. So that's kind of like where I'm at. Is that I'm going to be definitely very weary of anything that's doing something that's in kind. I'm going to be definitely looking more closely at the things that are have stronger, basically tokenomic models, for earning rewards. How does it work? Why does it work? And what is the potential game theory that's going to be going on, emotionally with different people? I mean,
Yeah.
because what we discussed before was the play to earn games. People that didn't play them to have fun, they played them to earn money, and it made it to where those coins were just a race to the bottom in value.
Right. Yeah. So basically, what you're saying, the way I understand it, is that you're going to look. So the learn from this, the educated response to what the situation that occurred is you want to look at coins that basically pay you out in a different sort of not the same, right?
Hmm.
So like chips paid you out in chips, right?
Hmm.
So you want to look at something that pays you out in, you said USD stablecoin, right? That's one of
Hmm.
the examples. So you're saying you feel like that's a better investment essentially when they're doing that based on this situation.
I would say it's still theoretical, but I would say it
Yeah.
provides better tokenomics. In other words, do the reward in the native token,
Right.
right? In other words, you hand me the native token. What am I going to do? I'm going to probably turn around and buy more of your token,
Reinvest it. Yeah. You're
right?
gonna
Or
restake it. Yeah,
Mhm.
essentially. Yeah. No, we did that. I think it's Sonic, right? That was one of the ones basically you're doing.
Mhm.
You're getting the award in Sonic, you just spun it right back into it. So it was like,
Well, I mean, the thing is, it was that Sonic was kind of in kind. I mean, because
yeah.
it's like well, you had Sonic City, but the thing is, though, is this like the staking rewards because you would have liquidity in different things, and they would come in and they would reward you in the um
Well, they had their
yeah
own
the
Sonic X, right?
DEX. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
the decentralized exchange. So it was
Yeah,
basically
exactly.
the exchange token.
Yeah.
So they gave you their exchange token
It
in,
was
and
it was it
even
was like almost like all like in house. It was like,
it was all in
yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Um, and the thing is, I was even with that model, and that's what I'm saying is that was technically an in kind model. Is
Yep.
that they had their own token.
Yeah.
So if they were basically able to say, okay, if now man, you're staking on our site, man, the exchange fees for using your site is X amount of harmony for everybody providing liquidity. We're going to do basically a profit share of that harmony that we earned, right? So then they no longer have a native token. But then let's say they come and they had the Sonic City on top of that, right? So then they say, well, if you actually use our token and you stake that our token on Sonic City, you get X, Y, and Z benefit, or you get some voting thing. So now you're earning, through your DeFi, additional harmony, which you want. But now if you buy their token, you can get these other extra benefits.
Hmm.
Then overall, that makes the tokenomics a little bit better because that means that you're encouraging people to buy that token instead of encouraging people to sell. Because ultimately, it's like when everything's in kind, once people get to their that's what it is. It's just human emotion, or way people decide to make their decisions. Because people will always act in their own self best interest. It
Right.
turns into a race to the bottom. Because once the token price moves downwards, almost everybody will follow suit. It's like I have to sell at the point of earn, otherwise I will miss out on the current value.
Right. I gotcha.
And
So
I
I
mean,
guess
economics boils down to human psychology.
yes. Oh, 100%. Yeah. It's always that way. Especially, you know, it's, yeah, because people, it's with the diamond hands, right? It's like
Yeah,
they always say. Yeah. It's, but so learning from this situation, basically takeaway.
I pretty much said it.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
just,
summarize. Like, what's the takeaway? Like, basically, look at your investments differently,
mhm.
as far as how they're paying you out. Is it incestual to the token that you're involved in? Um, you know, do
Yeah.
your own research, like I
Yeah,
say.
no, it's like it's like
But
as always we say, it's like do your own research. Make sure
yeah,
that you're taking a look at the tokenomics, look at the reward structure. Um, how are they actually handling distribution? How long is the distribution is going to be?
yeah,
Um, and ultimately, is this like I would say is ultimately the decision is going to be up to whoever's making the investment. But I would say take if it is an in kind reward, take a second look. If it's a brand new token, yes, there might be a massive upswing. If there is like you're gambling at that point, and typically is just like for new in kind stuff, there's going to be basically the hype going in. If you can find those, you go in, you can make some quick cash. Find your sell point. You hold
right,
too long because they're going to effectively crash as people start selling. Because once the sell starts, they go from these massive green candles, and that's all people pay attention to is like, okay, I have this history of this massive green candle, and then you could draw all of the Fibonacci's you want on it. It's not going to recover to those levels because
right.
those levels were based on the hype. They weren't
They're
based
sort of
on
false.
anything.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
false levels, essentially.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's there's that's the thing. I don't know. Oh, everybody wants to get rich quick situation, and I don't. It happens. Don't get me wrong.
Hmm.
It does happen, and you hear about the ones that happen, but you don't hear about the ones that don't. That's what I
Yeah.
always say. I was like, you're never gonna. You may hear some here and there, but for the most part, there's so many that don't that you would be discouraged to even try it. So
Yeah.
it's I
I
think
mean,
that's what a lot of people need to realize. It's in anything. Everybody we want to hang on as long as we can with something, and sometimes we gotta see the light and let it go before it takes us down.
and that's why I say it's just like you just have to be careful with this.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm actually, telling the story because I've seen too many stories where people have invested in crypto, regardless of I don't know what it is that they invested in, but they ended up upset about it. And then they basically do these videos, and typically it's somebody that's mildly famous or been doing videos for a long time, and then they do this long diatribe about how all of crypto is a scam, and they're basically going off of their own personal journey, as the evidence of it.
Right.
And there are, and I would say is like there's as many scams in crypto as there are in the stock market because there are
100%.
equivalencies.
Yes.
It's like Bernie Madoff existed. He stole money from a lot of people. It's just like, that's why it's like you have to do your own due diligence. You have to do your own research. And bad things happen even if you do your own research. That's why one of the biggest rules of investment is never invest more than you can afford to lose. If you're going to be upset, you're going to be crying, you're going to be depressed from a loss, you invested too much.
Yep.
And I mean, I could actually say from experience it hurts.
It does hurt. It
I was
always
like,
hurts.
it's like, and considering that it's like how much it went down by, it was just like, I was in significant profit, and
Yeah.
now I'm just not in significant profit anymore. It's just like I'm just looking at it, be like, oh man, that just is painful, you
Yeah.
know. Yeah, and it is what it is, and I'm just going to have to, take it, eat it, and move on. And as we're just getting to, is it's like, what is the lesson to carry away from it, and move forward. And this kind of rolls into a different conversation. It's just talking about the theory of everything and where we are at in the space, and why things are not moving the way we think they should be, and thinking about it even further.
Should be is mm, that is relative because we want to be and should be are two different things. So
Yep. Well, um, There's a lot of being a little pejorative, but crying on X, especially in the Algorand community, because I think did I mention that TravelX they basically dropped blockchain for the time being because of regulation.
No.
Yeah, so TravelX was basically they were doing NFT based tickets, and technically they were a Web 2.5 application. So you weren't using a Web 3 wallet; you were actually using an application that they built that would actually be branded by some airline, but the underpinnings of it was blockchain. You just wouldn't know it because you were just using this airline application for your ticket, and would allow you to buy.
Oh, yeah, we sort of talked about that in the past. Yeah,
Yep.
I do
Yeah.
remember this. Yeah.
So basically, they ended up in like 3 or 4 countries. A lot of users. They were driving a lot of transactions for Algorand. Well, recently they announced that they're going to go to a in-house solution for the tickets because some of the markets they're trying to get into, they're adverse to blockchain because of regulation. So it's becoming very regulatory heavy. It makes sense. And they actually came back out and said that they're not giving up on Algorand. That's where they prefer to be.
Yeah. Interesting.
Because basically it's actually raising their IT costs to go off of blockchain.
Okay.
Right. And it's putting a lot more burden on them, but they're doing it to where they can actually expand their business, and it makes business sense, right? But it actually reduced basically the use. But if you actually take a look at it, everything else that is integrating with Algorand or even blockchain is in the space of Web 2.5, and it's that thing. It's just that it's user experience, right? That's how you get people into it. You get them into it without them actually know that they're using it.
Right. That's what we're talking about. Easy button. Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, it's because the one thing is, it's like, and here's the running gag. It's like, it's like I run Linux as my daily desktop. Right. But I'm sitting here, laughing because my wife makes fun of me. She's like, it's like Linux is not going to take over the world. I'm like, dear, it already has. Every website you go to, you're using Linux.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's there, and people are using it without them realizing that they're actually using it. You have an Android phone, technically underneath there is, a Linux kernel.
Yeah, well, when Apple's essentially Linux, it's Unix based. Which is basically the same thing.
Slightly different, but yeah.
No, I understand, but under the hood, like you get deep down, it's Unix based.
But that's kind of direction things are kind of going. Is that we're going to end up with this transition period where we're going to have this Web 2.5, where there's a lot of these integrations, and people are going to start using it without realizing they're using it.
Yep.
And as the investors, I'm still kind of holding that theory of you're going to have a lot of people using blockchain without realizing it and creating transactions without realizing it. And I've already postulated, or kind of like, spoken out here is that what gives a blockchain value is use.
Utility.
Right. Well, it's utility, but it's,
yeah, it's use, but utility comes. If you have utility, use comes.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
I mean, honestly, like, I know you're not. I mean, I'm more of an XRP guy than you are, but I've been hearing a lot about in the news lately that a lot of the XRP's starting to get a lot of traction, a lot of mainstream media, which is interesting. So, just saying.
Yeah, it was built for the central bank, so
it was 100%. It's cross-border. I've said it before, and I'll say it again: is for cross-border transactions. 100%. That's what they have. They have become, and that's been their goal the entire time. It's never been anything more than that. I mean, sure, if people are like, "Oh, this works for this," I'm sure they'll welcome it, but their mission has always been cross-border transactions. So it's, and I think more and more people are starting to adopt it. I'm hearing more and more in the news that, that's what it's going to be. I see interviews with Brad Garlinghouse happening. It's interesting.
Yep.
So utility, that's what it boils down to. That's what I'm trying to say.
It does boil down to utility, and there's a lot of utility chains. So, that's why I say I have my 5 that I definitely pay attention to. You got to hedge your bets.
Exactly. So, anyways, so I'm done. I think. Yep. All right. So, you want to close it out?
Yeah. Well, so please give us a like, share, and please comment down below and tell us how we did, how we're wrong, and join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you.
Yep. Until next time.
Till next time.